We actually did sell this event out. Did you pay a lot of money to come here? My name is Patrice Shawn, and I am co-chair of Indivisible NEO, and we welcome you. We are hosting our very first town hall tonight. And I bet it has not escaped your notice that it's usually the state senators that call these kinds of meetings, right? We would have expected a newly elected junior senator with no prior government experience, no judicial law experience, to be willing to meet with his constituents. But our invited guest, Senator Bernie Moreno, chose not to show up to meet us tonight. But guess what? We showed up. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Welcome. And we are For the People, a constituent town hall on the human toll of Trumpism in Northeast Ohio. This town hall is brought to you tonight by Indivisible NEO. We are a very young group, just formed 3 months ago, this past January. Tom, if you want to raise your hand. He is our founder, and he asked me to come on board as his co-chair, which I gladly did. But we formed this out of the very same urgency that brought you out tonight. For those that aren't familiar with our national organization, Indivisible was founded in 2016 as a reaction to the election of President Donald Trump. It was founded by 2 congressional staffers, Leah Greenberg and Ezra Levin. The objective was to effectively resist the dramatic move to the right in the executive branch of the U.S. government under Trump. Our key principles are to remake democracy, embrace progressive values, coordinate and collaborate, and build a strong and strategic movement. And if you like, please check out indivisible.org for more information about our national group. So Indivisible NEO might be young, but we are growing very quickly. Our amazing members all volunteer their time, and we are an action-oriented group. Since January this year, we have organized visits to offices of Republican Senator Bernie Moreno, visits to District 14, Republican Congressman Dave Joyce's office, and 13th District Democrat Congresswoman Amelia Sykes. We have initiated thousands of phone calls to our elected officials. We host bi-weekly in-person meetings for our members with speakers whose topics are relevant and timely. And we have an online community of over 1,300 members. And this is the very first of hopefully many town halls. And that brings me to tonight. This town hall came about after we made many attempts to urge Senator Moreno to organize one of his own. 3 times Indivisible NEO members visited Senator Moreno's office with groups of 30 or more constituents who brought their stories and their concerns with the intent of advocating and hopefully influencing Senator Moreno's vote. It was only 3 months ago that he was sworn in as a junior senator in the 119th United States Congress, and we'd like to get to know him. After hundreds of calls, multiple letters to the editors, and a hand-delivered invitation, he has not agreed to meet his Ohio constituents in a town hall. We've been dismissed as paid troublemakers, professional protesters who are getting in the way of the Senate meetings, the concerns of his real constituents. Is anybody paid out there to be here tonight? We are real. After hundreds of calls, multiple letters to the editor, he has not agreed to meet us in a town hall. We've been dismissed. But the truth is, this is an organic grassroots movement made up of real people who don't have to pretend to be impacted by this Trump's created crisis and extremism. And Senator Moreno ceding his responsibility to the executive branch. Tonight is an opportunity to hear from 5 of those people directly, your friends, your community, members, of fellow citizens, the people that Bernie Moreno is too scared or doesn't care to face in person. After our constituent stories, we'll hear from Ohio House Representative Juanita Brent from the 22nd District. We also have Senator Nikki Antonio, Ohio Senate Majority Leader, tonight. And if time permits, we'd like to have a question and answer at the end of the meeting. You may notice QR codes throughout the room. You can scan these codes and you'll be taken to a form where you can share your own story or questions with the senator. You can also write down on note cards that we have in the back, provided on the table. So we'll be compiling all of these stories and sending them to Senator Moreno's office as part of a recap of the town hall that he missed tonight. And if you haven't already done so, please be sure to sign our petition calling for Senator Moreno and Senator Husted to hold public town halls. I'd like to thank Laura Ciocia, a member of Indivisible. She's walking down the aisle here. Laura is a member of our leadership team, and it was Laura who created the idea of doing a town hall and amassing an amazing team of talented, dedicated Indivisible NEO volunteers who have donated their time, talents, and have worked some very long hours with multiple meetings, hundreds of emails, reaching out to the Northeast Ohio community to make this happen tonight. And to keep things on track, we're fortunate to have Ken Harbaugh of Valor Media and the Ken Harbaugh Show, a Midas Touch podcast that features commentary and intimate conversations with leaders in the fight to protect democracy. Ken is also a former U.S. Navy pilot, a documentary filmmaker, a graduate of Yale Law School, and a longtime advocate for veterans. So please give a warm welcome to Ken Harbaugh.
They gave me the fancy mic. Can you hear me back there? All right, I don't need the handheld one. Geez, thank you so much, and thank you, Indivisible NEO. Did I hear that you've been around for 3 months? This is incredible. This is amazing. In a former life, I actually ran for Congress in this part of Ohio. I think I had 6 people at my first town. And one of them is actually with us.
And I wasn't even in your district.
And she couldn't even vote for me.
Yeah.
This is amazing. This is democracy in action. This is democracy made real. But I also see it as a warning sign. This is a red flag. This is the 3rd town hall for me this week. I did one with Susan 2 nights ago. And this doesn't happen unless something is wrong with our system. This is what it looks like. Forgive me for borrowing some medical terminology here, but this is what happens when the democratic antibodies are activated. When there's an infection. Right? When there's a virus in the system, in a democracy like ours, we respond. We are the antibodies. We are the ones who have to fight it. Because, look, I don't want to get too partisan or too confrontational, but I'm not sure we're getting the leadership we deserve, or the outrage and anger we deserve to fight this from the top down. It's going to be from the bottom up. It's up to us.
That's right.
I see a couple of Ukrainian flags, and a few folks came up to me afterwards. I just want to say I drove past the Ukrainian Catholic Church on the way here, and it got me thinking about my last trip to Ukraine. I'm headed back in a couple of weeks, but on the last one, we brought 30 plus ambulances across the border from Poland into Kyiv and and we're doing it again because the average lifespan of an ambulance at the front in Ukraine is 11 days.
Jeez.
Because they are targeted. And that's when we paint them black, right? So that they're harder to recognize.
Wow.
We left on 9/11 last year to kick off that trip. And I was with a team of Finns and Germans and Brits. Finland had just been welcomed into NATO. And I took a moment to thank that team, that coalition of partners from around the world. Because I thought about where I was on 9/11 in 2001 when we had been attacked. And in fact, the only time in history that Article 5 of NATO, a little jargony, but this is the important part of NATO that says when one member is attacked, we're all attacked. The only time in history that's been invoked was to defend America. And the Finns and the Germans and the Brits and the whole free world came to our aid. And I look at what's happening now, and I'm thinking, how did we get here? How did we get to the point where we're threatening to invade Canada and we're making nice with Russia? And look, I think this too shall pass, as the saying goes, but the damage is going to be lasting. The damage is going to last, I fear, for generations. Because there are some things you cannot just restart with the flip of a switch. And trust is one of those things. And believe me, we have betrayed the trust of our closest friends, and we have cozied up to some of the worst people in the world. We're going to hear some constituents today talk about the real world effects of what is happening right here in Northeast Ohio. Not a world away, not Ukraine, right here in Northeast Ohio. I have known some of these folks for many years. I might get a little choked up in introducing a few of them, but I want to get right to it. I actually have a official introduction for Susan, and I might start with it, but you know what? I'm just going to introduce Susan. Can you stand up here with me? Give me some moral courage. Susan, I've known since her son-in-law was alive. Heath Robinson, Sergeant First Class, SFC, Heath Robinson, served his country in Iraq, breathed some of the fumes I did, but it made him incredibly sick. But it's something we as a country asked him to do. It's something our government asked him to do, and he willingly carried that burden in Iraq and brought that sickness home with him. And as a country, we came together and decided, you know what? If we have enough money to send people to war, we ought to have enough money to take care of them when they come home. And so the PACT Act was passed. Not easily. Almost every Republican voted against it. In fact, 2 Republicans fist bumped when they killed the bill the first time. Do you want to say who they were?
Ted Cruz and Steve Daines. Rob Portman was standing there too.
Steve who?
Daines.
Ted Cruz and Steve Daines. But Susan has been at the tip of the spear in driving this legislation forward to take care of not just those who are still left fighting these illnesses, but the families as well. Her daughter, her granddaughter, grandson? Granddaughter. To the point where when the passage of the PACT Act was in doubt, and we needed a display of just how intensely we felt about it, how much it mattered. I think you might be in one of these pictures. there was a vigil on the steps of the Capitol.
6 days.
6 days, day and night, sleeping on the steps of the Capitol, making the point that, look, if this doesn't happen, people are going to die. People who would have willingly given their lives for this country are going to be condemned to die because of things that they were asked to do. That bill is named after Susan's son-in-law. It's the Heath Robinson, what's tax stand for?
Promise to address comprehensive toxins.
It's a promise. It's a promise. I have some bad news for you. In the continuing resolution that was just passed, the $23 billion that was promised to all of those vets who shouldered the burden for us, to their families, to Susan's daughter and granddaughter, that was removed from the continuing resolution. $23 billion. At the same time that the Department of Defense budget was increased. So you tell me where our priorities are. Susan, I've embarrassed you enough that I handed it over to you.
Yeah, thank you. You're gonna have to bear with me. When this passed in 2022, I thought I wasn't gonna have to tell this story again. It's very difficult for me. The Sergeant First Class Heath Robinson promised to address Comprehensive Toxins Act of 2022, or PACT Act for short, is a law that expanded VA healthcare and benefits for veterans exposed to burn pits and other toxic substances. This law helps to provide generations of veterans and their survivors with the care and benefits they've earned and deserve. On February 21st of this year, Senator Blumenthal proposed Senate Amendment 689 to the continuing resolution, which would have ensured full and uninterrupted funding for the Department of Veterans Affairs health care and benefits provided by the PACT Act, preventing any cuts or delays in light of the Trump administration's efforts to shrink the VA. The amendment was tanked by Senate Republicans, and as Ken said, in the continuing resolution, they took $23 billion away from the PACT Act fund. The namesake on this historic legislation, Heath Robinson, an Ohio Army National Guardsman combat medic who deployed to Iraq in 2006, was my son-in-law. I'm going to explain what Senator Moreno's vote meant to us and all veterans suffering from burn pits and other toxic exposures, because Senator Moreno voted no on that Blumenthal's resolution to protect the PACT Act. On March 21st, 2017, I received a highly distressed call from my daughter, Danielle. Heath had just been diagnosed with a rare lung cancer after the oncologist exclaimed, "What the hell have you been exposed to?" My kids were told that Heath had 4 to 6 weeks to live if a treatment couldn't be found to extend his life, because there was no research on how to treat his cancer. Having a 3-year-old daughter, Heath wanted to hurry and create a grand memory for her, so we booked a Disney cruise with the doctor's blessing, even though we were warned Heath could die on that cruise. The National Guard assured us that military personnel in Puerto Rico would come retrieve his body should he die. Fortunately, he survived the cruise, and with a miracle immunotherapy treatment, he fought to live for 3 years. 3 years of pain, suffering, nearly dying, emergency surgeries, many ER trips, being sent from hospital to hospital in Columbus, Ohio, because no one knew what to do with him. Heath's toxic exposures caused not only cancer, but a rare mucous membrane autoimmune disease as well, resulting in chronic gushing nosebleeds and bleeding from his ears. Sometimes these nosebleeds lasted for over an hour, while vomiting too. One morning, my granddaughter found him on the bathroom floor, covered in blood, leaving her traumatized and crying, "Why is this happening to my daddy?" This entire nightmare happened because there was no PACT Act. You see, the PACT Act mandates toxic screenings every 5 years for every service member who ever stepped foot in Iraq or Afghanistan. Had you gotten yours, Ken? Yeah. Okay. Had the PACT Act been in place, Heath would have been screened and his cancer possibly caught at early onset and more treatable. Senator Moreno's vote against protecting the PACT Act endorses the suffering that Heath and my family endured and will take the VA's motto we gave it back in 2017, back to delay, deny, hope you die. In 2019, Danielle, a physical therapist working full-time, had a young daughter and a terminally ill husband to care for, which became overwhelming. Someone suggested they apply for the VA's comprehensive caregiver benefits, which would pay a stipend so that Danielle could take an unpaid leave of absence from her job and be compensated as a full-time caregiver to her dying husband, a war veteran. They were denied. The VA stated that they knew Danielle was providing a high level of care to her terminally ill husband. However, they did not prove that his lung cancer, although it was 100% service-connected, was not combat-related. He had to prove his cancer was combat-related to get these benefits. At that time, the VA stance was, there is currently no scientific evidence connecting burn pits exposure and any serious illnesses. For those of you who aren't aware of what was burned in these 10-acre pits, here's a few things. Wrecked military vehicles and jets, computers, printers, dead animals, chemical weapons, plastic bottles, pesticide containers, mattresses. Human waste included human body parts, explosives, ammunition, medical waste, asbestos, batteries, paint cans, cleaning supplies, expired medications, and with jet fuel as an accelerant. It's no exaggeration to say the U.S. government unleashed chemical weapons attacks on America's soldiers. In late 2019, I moved in with Danielle and Heath to help. There were times when the two of us couldn't keep up with his care. More than once, Danielle collapsed on the floor out of sheer exhaustion from working a full-time job, stress of watching her husband slowly die, and not sleeping for days at a time. I can never rid my mind of the images and sounds of me laying on the floor next to her, trying to comfort her, while my granddaughter is crying, with her daddy in the next room, crying and puking with blood gushing from his nose, struggling to breathe because oxygen tubes don't stay in your nose when you have a bloody nose. I had to leave my daughter on the kitchen floor to save Heath from dying by shoving the oxygen tube in his mouth in between episodes of vomiting. Senator Moreno's vote against protecting the PACT Act endorses the suffering my family endured by being denied caregiver benefits. At one point, Heath was in extreme abdominal pain for which doctors were perplexed. These illnesses from toxic exposures aren't typical, and neither are the side effects from the treatments. Eventually, a drug that mitigated Heath's pain was realized, which costed $2,000, so the VA denied it. Heath, being a soldier, had battled hard, but the pain was so unbearable that he begged my daughter and me to overdose him. I doubt Senator Moreno knows how it feels to watch a loved one suffer intense pain, be denied the medication to mitigate it by the government who sent him off to war and poisoned him with illegal burn pits because it cost too much. Senator Moreno's vote against protecting the PACT Act endorses the suffering that Heath and my family endured, so much so Heath begged us to kill him. May 5th, 2020, the VA sent their contracted hospice provider to the home without a hospital bed and other necessary supplies. We learned that the nurse wasn't given enough of the meds that they used to help the patient die peacefully. Because the VA didn't get the supplies Heath needed to help him die, the only place we could get Heath comfortable was on the floor with Danielle under him, holding him in her arms, which she did for 7 hours. Around 4 a.m., someone showed up with a bed, setting it up a couple feet from where Heath was dying on the floor, disturbing him with air compressor noise so loud it could have woke up the entire block. And they brought no sheets. The only twin sheets available were my granddaughter's Little Mermaid sheets. It crushed me to know I was going to watch her daddy die on her Little Mermaid sheets. I get the sheets on the bed when the nurse says, Well, he's dead weight right now. We can't get him in the bed. He's gonna have to die on the floor. Danielle took charge and insisted getting him in the bed. He already was dying with his dignity stripped by the VA, and she wasn't gonna allow it anymore and let him die on the floor. Senator Moreno's vote against protecting the PACT Act endorses that suffering that Heath and my family endured. Because the VA claimed more research was needed to prove burn pits caused his cancer, I had arranged with a leading researcher at Vanderbilt University that when Heath died, he would coordinate a lung autopsy. Again, the VA should have been doing this, but they weren't interested in spending the money. My daughter paid $1,800 for this autopsy. The findings were more shocking than we expected. The pathologist said it looked like a bomb went off in his lungs. Aside from huge cancer tumors, Heath had other diseases we weren't aware of: pulmonary fibrosis and interstitial lung disease, which was possibly the rare constrictive bronchiolitis that many soldiers have been diagnosed with. He had deformed blood vessels in his lungs and unidentifiable cells that we later learned were titanium. Several days after Heath's death on May 6, 2020, my daughter received a letter from the VA stating that on May 6th, the board convened to reconsider Heath's appeal on the caregiver benefits denial, when they received word that the soldier had passed away. Therefore, they closed the case. They extended condolences to her for the loss of her husband and thanked her for taking care of their soldier. They denied the caregiver benefits, but thanked her for taking care of her soldier, her husband. Senator Moreno's vote against protecting the PACT Act endorses the suffering that Heath and my family endured. Had the PACT Act been in place, most of the nightmare I just explained, and I didn't tell you everything, wouldn't have happened. Yes, Heath would have gotten cancer most likely, but like I said, the screenings mandated now might have saved his life or at least extended his life. They would have received the caregiver benefits, which would have helped relieve a lot of the stress. He would have gotten that $2,000 drug. We believe the hospice care would have been better had the PACT Act been in place, because we feel we got the cheaper deal because Heath's cancer wasn't considered combat related. That's why we fought so hard for the PACT Act, so that other families wouldn't have to suffer like we did. The proposed cuts to the VA and the $23 billion cut from the PACT Act's Toxic Exposure Fund is going to hurt veterans, whether they are PACT Act covered or not. As of February of 2025, 1,533,309 PACT Act claims have been approved, with an approval rate of over 74%. 31,000 of these are Ohio veterans. Before the PACT Act, 78% of burn pit claims were denied by the VA. These VA cuts are a direct threat to veterans, their families, and continuing the implementation of the PACT Act. The proposed cuts are not just numbers on a budget sheet. They are a direct assault on the lives of our nation's warfighters, their families, and the hard-fought progress made with the PACT Act. Slashing 80,000 jobs and cutting funding will cripple the VA's ability to properly implement the PACT Act, as well as cripple providing health care and benefits to all veterans in the VA healthcare system. Longer backlogs will be created, delaying medical care, increase veteran suicides, and increase suffering for the veterans already facing severe health conditions. Senator Moreno voted to approve these cuts, and I would like to ask him why. Why would you not protect sick and dying war heroes and families like mine from needless suffering? Why are you opposed to caring for the men and women who willingly went off to war and fought for all of you and all of us? Why? Thank you.
I hear about what was in those pits. And you could see them from miles away. I was flying recon missions 30,000 feet in the air, and I could see the columns hundreds of miles away. Some of those barracks were right next to them. I wonder if Bernie Moreno would build a house next to one of those pits, or put one of his offices or one of his dealerships next to one of those pits. It's amazing to me that the so-called leaders who are quickest with the pen to make cuts are the ones who've never had to risk that kind of thing, ever. Much less show up in front of your constituents. When you are terrified of your constituents, maybe you don't deserve the title senator.
That's right.
Our next speaker is a medical doctor, Dr. Arthur Lavin of Shaker Heights, a pediatrician with nearly 40 years of experience and the chair of Doctors Organized for Healthcare Solutions. For decades, Dr. Lavin has sat across from parents struggling with vaccine hesitancy, listening to their fears, answering their questions, and working to ensure that every child in his exam room is protected from preventable disease. He has seen firsthand one family's choice to opt out of immunizations can put entire communities at risk. Dr. Lavin is also my kid's pediatrician. And my oldest is 19 now, 15 and 12. They haven't been in your office for a while, but I want to share a story about Lizzie with you, who, as you know, when she was born, actually the first time I started to care about politics was when the nurse who helped deliver Lizzie said, "Brace yourself." And my little girl, she needed 4 really tough surgeries as a baby to help repair her mouth and her jaw, and the doctor said she'll probably never really talk, or certainly in a way that you'll be able to understand what she's saying. That wasn't Dr. Lavin. That was her surgeon. Last week, she came home from trying out for a part in the musical Cinderella. And she said, "Dad, I got the part."
Oh.
And I said, what part? Are you a mouse? Are you a pumpkin? And she said, "Dad, I'm Cinderella." Thank you, Dr. Lavin, for being our doctor and for taking care of our kids. And please convey just how much is at stake with the cuts that we're about to face.
Thank you. I'm overwhelmed. Thank you, Sarah. I mean, the story really shook me up, and it's just incredible that there's 5 or 6 shocking stories to tell tonight. You know, a lot of us might ask, and thank you, Ken, and congratulations to Cinderella. It is a real Cinderella story, isn't it? A lot of us might ask, where's Bernie Moreno, but not me? Because I know exactly where he is. He's with the people he cares about. There's only 2 of them. You know their names, Musk and Trump. He cares about what they need, and he's working hard to provide for those needs. And he's made it quite clear he doesn't care about Sarah's story or my story, any of the other speaker stories, anyone here tonight. And I want to say again what Ken has said. We haven't seen rooms like this in American history for a long time. I love town halls now. How about you all? And I'm reminded that town halls began the American Revolution. Because what's democracy? Democracy is a system in which the people's real needs are heard and addressed. Tonight we heard a real need. And we're going to make sure it gets addressed. And we're going to hear other real needs. So I know that he doesn't care about our needs and our stories. He doesn't want to hear the stories. But what are the needs and cares that he's ignoring? And as a doctor, I'm here to say that he doesn't care about our health. He doesn't care about our life. So you might say, what does healthcare have to do with democracy? And who here in the room has heard of Tim Snyder? Who wrote, oh, okay, there we go. I'm in the right room. How many people have seen this book by him? Oh, wow, I'm impressed. So those who haven't, Tim Snyder got appendicitis, and he went from hospital to hospital, got terrible care. And while he was recovering, he was in the hospital for I don't know how many weeks, for appendicitis, for many weeks in the hospital. He wrote this book. Because what he came to realize was the deep, profound connection between health and democracy. Because if democracy is the ability of a nation to hear each person's needs and to respond to them, what greater failure can we have as a community to ignore the healthcare needs of our community and not respond to them? And so I'm going to talk tonight about 3 ways in which the current administration hasn't just failed, but has actually sought harm to each of us in 3 different ways when it comes to health. As a pediatrician, of course, I'm going to focus on children. Hope that's okay, folks. So the first is measles. I think everyone's heard of measles. The second one, I bet most of you haven't heard of. It's called the ACIP. Anyone hear of the ACIP? That's good. And the third is bird flu. They all have to do with immunizations. So I'll just be real quick on the measles story. Our group, Doctors Organizing Healthcare Solutions, joined Nurses for America, and a broad coalition of people tried to stop RFK. One of our doctors was in the room at the hearing for RFK, and she sat in a row of doctors in white coats and was vilified by most of the audience because they hated people who were standing up for science and care in the audience. So why were they there? Because when measles broke out in the country of Samoa in 2019, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. did what he could to stop people from getting the MMR. And he succeeded. Nurses in the midst of the measles epidemic told the governor of Hawaii, Josh Green, that his actions helped depress use of the MMR. Now what happened in Samoa? In the midst of the epidemic, when it was really flaring, Robert F. Kennedy wrote a letter, it's signed and anyone can get it online, to the Prime Minister of Samoa, in which he suggested that the measles vaccine was causing the epidemic. Just think about that for a moment. As a result, the island nation of Samoa began to run out of children's caskets because of what this man did. And the response of our Senate was to vote for him to be in charge. There we go. That's the right answer. So he's now head of HHS. Bill Cassidy, who's a gastroenterologist who made part of his fame, senator from Louisiana, got there because he helped immunize Louisiana against hepatitis B. It's one of his proudest achievements. I spoke to his staff of Nurses for America, and they said, don't worry about the vote for him because he knows that if he violates his promise not to go against immunizations, that the senator would be there to pull him in. Okay, so I know in America we have trouble hearing about other lands, but measles is here. It's in Texas. It's New Mexico. It's going to be all over the place because measles is very contagious. If a group of people go under 95% immunized, it begins to spread. So a child has died in Texas from a disease that they would never have to die from. The parents have to live with that death the rest of their life. And our head of HHS comes out onto the national stage with an action that can make sure no other child dies. How do I know that? Because in 2000, the United States had 95% plus immunization rates for measles. And guess how many cases of measles were in the United States in the year 2000? 0. When you have 0 cases, 0 people died. Because of the anti-vax efforts, measles is spreading. And when the head of our health services, HHS, goes onto the national stage to say that vitamin A is the way, cod liver oil is the way, and doesn't mention the one way that will save lives, he is guilty of promoting death to our children by measles. So that's one way. That's one way what's going on is hurting our health and overturning our democracy. A less familiar phrase is ACIP. I hope after tonight you'll never forget what this stands for. It's the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practice. It's the committee that meets the CDC and decides which vaccination should everyone get. How many here have ever gotten an MMR? Okay. Now, did it cost anyone here a lot of money to get that MMR? Does anyone remember having to pay a lot of money? The only reason why it didn't cost a lot of money is because the federal law states that if the MMR is on the ACIP schedule, every insurance package in the United States has to pay for it. Now, all you have to do is drop MMR off the ACIP schedule, and insurance will no longer be obligated to pay for it. It will lose its liability protections. Manufacturers may stop making it. Robert Kennedy Jr. has decided to recast the ACIP. And with his people in place, he can drop MMR, he can drop meningitis, he can drop tetanus protections, every immunization you can think of. That step will lead to death of our children. And yet, Senator Bernie Moreno, who is somewhere, he's not here, but he's busy doing what he needs to do, has taken actions to help put us into this catastrophe. That's ACIP. The last example I'll share with you has to do with bird flu. So I think the most important thing about bird flu is that we had a bird flu pandemic in the world in 1918. We now know, it took a few decades actually, but we now know that the origin of that virus was from ducks in Kansas. So it was a bird flu. And the thing about bird flu is, as long as a virus can only infect your cell, it can unlock the combination. Each cell has like a safe, the virus has to find the right proteins on each cell to get inside and infect you. The proteins on duck cells are different than human cells. So a virus that can infect ducks typically cannot infect humans. And the ducks in Kansas could not infect humans until 1918. And then something like 100 million people were killed once it figured out how to get into humans, not just into humans, but transmit from human to human. So the bird flu that's out there now is spreading across chickens and ducks and all sorts of birds. And about 800 cases have been diagnosed in humans. But that means the virus has figured out the trick of unlocking the combination to the human cell. The reason why we're here tonight in this room safely is because the virus hasn't figured out yet how to go from my human cell to your human cell. So if you work on a duck farm and you get the bird flu, you're not going to spread it to anyone in your family because it only got into you because you're soaking in the bird flu virus. And it can push its way through without being very adept at doing so. But every time that a person gets the bird flu, the virus mutates, and one of these zillion times, the virus will pop out that can go from person to person, which is what happened with COVID and other such pandemics, including AIDS. AIDS, we believe, came from chimpanzees. It's the same story for all these catastrophes. Now, here's the deal. As of now, we know about 800 or so cases of bird flu in humans. So far, there's been not much evidence of any of those cases spreading to another human. But guess how many of those 800 people have died from their case of bird flu? About 400. If 800 people got COVID, we would expect less than 8 people to die. With this virus, it's 400. Now, what we don't know is that is whether when the virus changes, so it can spread from person to person, will it still kill half of the people that get infected? It may not. It may not. But we're dealing with a germ that is deadly. And if we let it loose and it maintains 50% mortality, and we have the same number of cases of bird flu as we had of COVID, then instead of 1 million people dying in the United States from COVID, it'd be 40 million. That would mean there'd be a pretty good chance, it'd be almost guaranteed that if we all got bird flu, a good chunk of us would be killed by it. And here's the good news. In 1918, there were no flu shots. So we had 100 million deaths. But it's still an influenza virus. So we know how to make flu shots, right? So we could make a shot for this bird flu virus, like we make any other flu shot. Problem is, the virus that would spread across billions of people and kill a good chunk of us hasn't come into existence yet. So you can't put it into a lab and make a vaccine for it yet. You can only do that once you know that you've got the virus. The only reason we have the COVID vaccine in time, in enough time to save, we believe the COVID vaccine saved about 2 million lives in the United States. The only reason that happened is because in China they got the genetic code of the COVID. Once the COVID virus was set to go and rip through humanity, we got the gene sequence within 24, 48 hours of that happening, and we were off to the races making the vaccine. If you don't know that the bird flu has figured out how to spread across humanity, if you don't get that virus into a lab and make the right flu shot for it, then there'll be no flu shot for the bird flu. Now, what's our chance of doing that right now under Robert F. Kennedy Jr.? Any guesses? Yeah. Here's how bad it is. The regular flu virus every year changes. So you have to take it it takes about 6 months to make the new batch. It comes to Ohio in the middle of December every year. So what's 6 months before that? June, right? So you've got to have your flu virus sequences in hand by April or so, or May. He stopped it. It's not happening. We're not making flu vaccine for this fall right now. And if we can't do that, what's our chance of being able to know? We left the World Health Organization, so our ability to go into various areas and find the bird flu virus when it can infect masses of people is gone. So from measles to ACIP to bird flu, we are in danger. And Bernie Moreno is actively doing his part to make sure we are in trouble. So thank you again for coming out. We love the town halls, and let's get democracy back in America.
One of the common themes that I hear again and again, especially when I listen to people in white coats that they've earned speak, is that there are so many people out there who toil away invisibly keeping us safe. And we don't even know it until they're targeted. I'm talking about the virologists and immunologists at the CDC, the food inspectors at the FDA, the air traffic controllers, right? I'm a Navy pilot. Until they start getting fired, and until planes start crashing, or bird flu starts to wreak havoc. I think we take for granted just how fragile the system can be when it's up against people who don't care about science. Something that Dr. Lavin said, stuck with me, it's pretty simple. If you don't believe in science, I guess you can't do the math. 0 cases means 0 deaths, right? That seems pretty obvious to me. But I fear that we're being led by people who believe more in dogma than science, and it's literally killing us. Our next speaker is Rowena Gilmore Vargas of Bedford Heights. She's a 31-year retired public servant who served as both a case manager in juvenile corrections and spent a decade as the special education secretary in the Ohio Department of Youth Services. And most importantly, Rowena is a wife, mother of 4, grandmother of 8, and great-grandmother of 1. Rowena brings a deeply personal perspective to us today. She lost her daughter, just 29 years old, to sickle cell anemia, a devastating genetic illness that disproportionately affects Black Americans. Her 14-year-old grandson also lives with this painful disease and is awaiting acceptance into a potential life-saving clinical trial. But that opportunity is now at risk. The Trump administration's proposed cuts to the National Institutes of Health and the National Science Foundation threaten to halt critical medical research, particularly for diseases like sickle cell anemia that have long been underfunded. NIH, which supports nearly 50,000 research grants annually, is facing a $10 billion funding reduction, cuts that will force labs to shut down, delay clinical trials, and stop progress on life-saving treatments.
Wow.
Senator Bernie Moreno has dismissed the importance of NIH's infrastructure costs, misrepresenting them as wasteful spending. In reality, these funds sustain the very clinical trials that families like Rowena's depend on. To share her story and the urgent need to protect research funding, please welcome Rowena.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Bear with me. This is only my second time doing this, the first time being at Senator Moreno's downtown office a few weeks ago, but it is just that important to me that we don't allow the man who thinks he's king to get away with the things he's trying to get away with. All right, so as has been mentioned, my oldest daughter, Martina, was her name. Oh, I'm sorry, can you guys hear me? Okay, my oldest daughter, her name is Martina. I say is because she's always here in my heart. Passed away 14 years ago from complications due to sickle cell. Now, some of you, I'm sure, are probably familiar with the term sickle cell, the disease, but not actually what it entails. So I'll give you a little quick bit of information. People who are afflicted with sickle cell disease, unlike those of us whose red blood cells are soft and round, some of their red blood cells become sickle-shaped and hard, and because of that, it hinders the ability to carry oxygen to vital parts of the body, and sometimes the sickle cells become bunched up in other parts of the body, but mainly joints. That's what my daughter, it happened to her. They would bunch up in her joints, and she would then have what is known as a pain crisis. And a pain crisis, just to give you a point of reference, as I've been told, is akin to having a toothache. So imagine having to go through that on a regular basis. My daughter was in the hospital so much that, excuse me, I get emotional, that the night people who worked there knew me because we were in the hospital so much and I would stay with her. She, at 9 years old, she got a transient ischemic attack. And what that is a temporary stroke, for lack of a better explanation. And because of that, she had a test done and they realized that the sickle cells were narrowing the blood vessels in her brain. And so to keep her from having a permanent stroke, she started having to have monthly blood transfusions. When you get monthly blood transfusions, iron tends to build up in your body. But I became a nurse basically. They hooked her up to a machine 6 nights a week that I used to have to hook her up to draw the extra iron out of her body. She developed an allergic reaction to that and to all the other things that could help draw out that iron, and eventually she suffered from iron overload and complications with that. Her liver grew up to like 5 times its size. She was a little bitty thing and her stomach was way out here, and it eventually started failing, which can happen with sickle cell patients because the oxygen is hindered from getting into their organs. Their lifespan is shortened. She lived, like was said, to be 29 years old. She ended up going in the hospital the day she gave her youngest son a birthday party, his last birthday party. She had 2 sons. She gave him that party. We didn't know she was sick. She wouldn't let us know because she wanted to give him that party. After the party, she went in the hospital. She never came home. 2.5 months before that party, My youngest daughter had a baby. She got pregnant. Martina, my oldest daughter, helped her deliver that baby, her first nephew, and she was so happy and so excited. Well, the 2.5 months passed, and like I said, she was in the hospital, and she never came home. But before she passed, she made me promise to get her nephew tested for sickle cell disease. We did, and he was diagnosed with sickle cell disease. That was 14 years ago. In the interim, because of what the National Institute of Health and the National Science Foundation, the research that they do, they have been able to come up with gene therapy, the doctor and I were talking about, in different ways that they can help sickle cell patients with the complications they get from sickle cell. It can effectively eradicate it from them. It doesn't cure it, because if they have children, those children can be born with the sickle cell disease, but it'll eradicate the complications that they get and extend their life. Because at this point now, sickle cell patients, at the time my daughter passed, the life expectancy was like 30, and she made it to 29, and now I believe it's like 40. My 14-year-old grandson, he's 14 now, he's in high school, he plays in the marching band, he does so much, but he misses a lot of school because he too ends up in the hospital a lot. In fact, the last time I told this story, when we were at Moreno's office, the next day he was in the hospital with a sickle cell crisis, and he just came home last week from another one. He was approved last year to participate in one of those clinical trials, and they started doing the testing in December, and it was found out in January that he was disqualified from being able to participate in that particular one because his bilirubin was too high. However, there are other clinical trials he can participate in, but because they have pulled funding and are trying to effectively, in my opinion, shut everything down that helps anybody in this entire country. Because they have done that, it's up in the air whether he will be able to participate in any clinical trials that could potentially save his life. And because they have pulled funding, it's hindering the NIH and the NSF to do additional research that could potentially save his life, but also eradicate sickle cell altogether. And not just sickle cell, cancer. Find out what's going on with Alzheimer's, all kinds of disease, but they don't care. They don't care because it's not in their best interest in what they're trying to do. So what that has done for my family and I, it has not only given us back the fear, but angry and frustration that my grandson, my 14-year-old grandson, could suffer the same fate as his auntie, my daughter, Martina. And that is scary. But it also reinforces my determination to fight and not go silently into the dark. So what I would ask of everybody within the sound of my voice, and that you tell anybody who you can tell, to keep on fighting the fight. We must participate in the resistance. We must do the marches. We must do the calling. And we must do the boycotting. We must do the boycotting. People think those things aren't effective, but I know that the boycotting is definitely effective because all they understand is money. And if you take their money from them, they will stand up and pay attention. What I would like for the media to do, especially the national media to do, is to stop reporting everything Trump does, from what he eats for breakfast to what he poops at night. And please focus on the resistance, focus on what is being done to counter him, and focus on the lies that he tells. Pinpoint those, call him out on it. And lastly, what I want to know from Senator Moreno is what he's getting out of ignoring his constituents. Why is he so loyal to Donald Trump? Why is he voting for cuts that can actually cause the death of the people he claimed to support? And I really want to know if he's honorable enough to meet with his constituents instead of putting out fake pictures and fake media trying to make other people think what we know is not true, that he's not meeting with us and he doesn't give a hoot about those of us in Ohio. I just want to say, if you get discouraged, please, please, please deal with that, feel it, and then keep on going, because it is very important. It's up to us. Thank you.
I often get asked what I think they're doing in DC. What's the end goal? And I don't really know. I'm not a psychologist. But sometimes you wonder if the goal isn't actually to destroy government, to make it so ineffective, so inefficient that everything has to be privatized. Right? It's all about money in the end.
Trying to make your foundation doesn't want to make you a constituent. It's trying to make you a custom. The government is not run for custom.
And look, we've got 3 more speakers who are much smarter about this stuff than I am, but Rowena's comments leave me with a lesson I learned a very long time ago, that I don't know how it has not made it into the senator's office down in DC, but it's simple. It's that I am my brother's keeper. And I think we need to remember. Our next speaker is Jessica Hare from North Royalton. She's a mother fighting for the future of her medically fragile 13-year-old son. His health, education, and ability to live at home with his family all depend on programs like the Medicaid waiver and protections of the Department of Education. News today, breaking news about the Department of Education. While lawmakers, including Senator Moreno, claim Medicaid will be protected, the new continuing resolution mandates $880 billion in spending cuts over the next decade, which is only possible by making drastic cuts to Medicaid. These changes threaten access to essential medical care and home health services to the more than 3 million Ohio residents who currently utilize Medicaid. The Department of Education is also being gutted. Under President Trump, staffing has been slashed in half, disproportionately affecting the Office for Civil Rights, which is responsible for investigating discrimination against students with disabilities. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, along with Section 504, both ensure students with disabilities receive equal access to education and are now at risk because the attorneys responsible for enforcing these laws have been fired. Yet, Senator Moreno has openly praised these cuts, stating, "What Elon Musk is doing, God bless him." In reference to the baseless claims that DOGE is rooting out waste and fraud in the government. Moreno claims these cuts will improve educational outcomes, but in reality, they are stripping away the very resources that children like Jessica's son rely on to learn and thrive. To share what these cuts mean for families across our state, please welcome Jessica.
So this is my first time doing this, so I should have more leeway, but I'm very nervous. I apologize. I will get emotional. My son Declan was born not moving and gray. I'm so sorry. There were no warning signs, and for a long time there were no answers. Declan had to have a number of medical interventions early on. He got a trach, a ventilator, and a G-tube. In order for him to survive and thrive, he would essentially live on life support. We learned at 7 months old that Declan had an ultra-rare orphan disease called MTM. We were told to enjoy our time with him as he lay playing on the doctor's table because he wouldn't make it past a year. Most kids with MTM don't make it past 2. Tell you a little bit about me. I can calm down. I was born and raised in Canton, Ohio. I've lived in various cities across this. Oh, are you bringing tissues? Oh, water. Thank you. I'm never prepared. Thank you. I've lived in various cities across Ohio, from Cincinnati to Cleveland. I attended Miami University, where I earned 2 degrees, and met my husband. Apologize for my language. We've both been active contributors to this state for 2 decades. When we decided to start a family, we did so with no idea the path our lives would take. When you plan to have a family, when you're pregnant, the thing to say, the thing everybody says is, as long as they're healthy. No one ever dares to consider or even address what if they're not. Oh, sorry.
You're good.
As Ken mentioned, Declan just turned 13. He's in 7th grade. He loves YouTube. He loves animals. He loves making hybrid animals. He thinks every animal should go together somehow. He loves jump scares, especially jump scaring mom. He can tell you what every dinosaur name means in Latin or Greek or Chinese. He's ornery and brilliant and brave. He's faced more trauma and obstacles in his life than most people will ever know. He's alive. He's amazing. And he deserves everything any other child does. But it's not that simple. Declan's physical needs require 24/7 awake care. As parents, as a family unit, it's nearly impossible to do alone. As a medical parent, the most common thing we hear, which we all love, is, "I don't know how you do it." Our standard answer, "He's our son." I mean, we love him, and I would hope that if he were your son, you would do it too. But one other very important factor, and this is how I should have been answering this question for years, is that we do so because we're lucky enough to have had Declan during a time where there's a system of supports and regulations that exist for kids like him. Because of Medicaid waiver, Declan can live at home with his family where he belongs, rather than in an institution. Before waivers, kids like mine went to facilities. A key to waiver is that it covers nursing services, so that parents have support, they have the support to work, sleep, and at least attempt to function while their child is safe. Because the ACA banned lifetime maxes, my husband and I have not gone bankrupt having a multi-million-dollar kid. Because of the ADA, Declan has access to places even though he uses a wheelchair. Because of IDEA, I'm so pissed about this Department of Education. Because of IDEA and FAPE and IEPs, he's able to attend school, learn with his peers, and make friends. Because of the concepts of diversity, equity, and inclusion, Declan isn't just able to be somewhere, but people figure out ways to actually include him. I'm gonna take a drink, sorry. I need practice.
There's no practice for
You know, doing good.
So honestly, that is how we've done it. That is the only way it can be done. And even with all of these programs in place, many things have still been a battle, one that we continually, happily fight to ensure Declan has what he needs. As a medical parent, you never know what the future will hold, but you have hope, and you have programs and the law on your side, at least for now. With the upcoming cuts to Medicaid, threat to Section 504, and the dismantling of the Department of Education, Declan's future is more uncertain than ever. Last week, he brought home his certificate for being on the honor roll at school this past quarter. And while my first reactions were joy and pride, just below the surface was the fear and the sadness and the anger. With the new Secretary of Education who doesn't even know what IDEA is. With teachers being instructed to remove signs from their classroom that say, "All are welcome." With an Ohio senator talking about how expensive it is to educate kids like mine compared to typical kids who come from loving homes. as if we don't love our child. With the overall attack on diversity, equity, and inclusion, concepts that pretty much sum up Declan's existence, it seems that the coming policies and mandates will be that my child and my family stay in the shadows where we belong and eventually falter. I wanted to speak today, as much as I can speak, I apologize again, because most people don't know families like mine exist. I certainly didn't before this became my life. And our families don't really have a voice, because once you're in this life, you spend most of your time keeping your kids alive, fighting insurance companies, going to doctor's visits and therapies, going to IEP meetings, hopefully working, sometimes sleeping, trying to give your child the best life he can have. After that, most of us are too exhausted to keep an eye on politics. But our entire lives are shaped by politics. Policies are what enable us to keep going. And we are paying attention. We are part of our communities, we are part of our state, we are part of our country. The system to support our families were put in place for a reason, and we deserve a voice, and our kids deserve a chance. And I hope that when others are fighting for minority groups, they remember families like mine. I would like to know what Bernie expects families to do when these supports are taken away, and we no longer are able to work, be productive members of society, keep our homes, when our children are no longer able to access care, get medical supplies, or attend school. We are your constituents. We are human beings. We are those whose children weren't born healthy, and we kept on going. Oh, that's...
Our next speaker is Lauren Marcaza. She's a dedicated member of the Mentor-accepted Village School District Board of Education, having been elected in November of 2023 and beginning her 4-year term. I'm sorry, I'm so thank you. And beginning her 4-year term in January 2024. Lauren is also the director and editor of publications at Case Western Reserve University, where she oversees several of the university's alumni magazines and other external communications. She is a graduate of Mentor Public Schools and a parent of 2 children in the district who is deeply invested in the success of the schools there. As part of her board position, Lauren serves in the role of legislative liaison, where she's responsible for reporting on state and federal education laws to fellow board members and the wider district community. In late February, a video clip of Lauren giving one of these reports found its way onto a far-right social media account known for trafficking in hate and conspiracy theories. In the clip, Lauren reads excerpts of Trump's executive order ending radical indoctrination in K-12 schooling, while pointing out that it is in conflict with existing federal laws that prohibit the federal government from dictating state curriculum. None of this should be controversial, regardless of where you sit on the political spectrum. But Senator Bernie Moreno decided the best way to serve the interests of his constituents was to turn an innocuous moment from a local school board meeting into a self-serving political stunt. And while he may know little about how our government works, understatement, he knew exactly what he was doing when he aligned himself with a far-right propaganda platform and launched a baseless PR campaign against a local school board member who was simply doing her job. Tonight, Lauren will be speaking to us in a personal capacity and not on behalf of the Mentor Board of Education. And with that, please give a warm welcome to Lauren Marcaza.
And a previous Mentor Cardinal, once a card, always a card. And I am going to say thank you from a mother who was a secretary at Bellflower for 34 years, public education. I am now a special education teacher at Broadmoor, and I want to tell you, you rocked it. Shame on all those people. You are all
And I'm gonna take a second, because I'm a resident of Mentor, Ohio too. Two of my children graduated from that school. And when Lauren joined our school board, she, just like you said, she rocks. She holds a meeting and she holds us accountable. She's awesome.
Thank you.
After speaking, I can't even imagine what you all have gone through, and it's so strange for me to be up here speaking after very brave women and men. So thank you for sharing those experiences. I can tell you a little bit about what Senator Moreno has been up to, since clearly he's not listening to his constituents. So yes, I serve on a school board, and if you're from Mentor, you say Mentor, not Mentor. And we're about an hour away on the lake shore, and I grew up there, and now I'm raising my children there. So I'm in my second year, also in my second year of serving as the legislative liaison, which as described is my job, to liaise with our legislators, but also to report to the board and community about laws that are going to be impacting our local public schools. So I give a monthly report, and I did this in February at our regular meeting on the 11th, and they had just, the president had just issued his executive orders late January, early February, and we've been getting questions, understandably, from folks, our constituents, and they're desperate to know, what does this mean? What is this going to do to our schools? What does this mean for my children? And so I brought those up during my report, and I said, there's some things that we need to understand. Everybody just kind of hit the brakes, let's take a beat and think about what all these might mean, at least for right now. And so what I did was I kind of went through the executive orders, and I mentioned that, hey, don't forget, there are these directives and these orders that say, yes, that, we have to do this, this, and this to, I actually have it, I think it's to end, I think it was gender ideology, and critical race theory in K through 12 curriculum. That was one of the directives. And I said, well, it's important to remember, though, that that the states already control, curriculum, right? So I hear a lot about, transferring power back to the states when it comes to education. So I clarified for our audience that, that's already the case. Ohio and every other state has a state curriculum. We in Mentor follow that state curriculum. That's been the case for a very long time. And then the second thing I pointed out was that there are federal laws in place that actually dictate that the federal government cannot interfere with state. The first one that came to mind was the Every Student Succeeds Act. I think it was from 2015, so fairly recent. But it said that local control is what's really important, and that should reign supreme, right? So federal law should not, federal mandates cannot interfere with state curricula. So I pointed that out as well. And then finally, what I also said was, and you notice in these executive orders, there are a lot of these phrases like as applicable by law, or as authorized or permissible by law. That's sort of an acknowledgement to say, yeah, we understand there are these federal laws in place. So it was really me sort of explaining, what these executive orders are, but also that there are a lot of factors at play here, and we have to remember that. And so that's what I do in my report, is try to break it all down for folks to help them understand, and basically just wait and watch and see what happens. So that's what I did. So crickets after that. Nobody said anything on the board, no questions, no comments, we moved on. And then 4 days later, my board president, her name is Maggie Cook, and she's also terrific, received a letter from Senator Moreno. In it, I actually have some excerpts. In it, he pointed out my report, and he asked the board to take a position on what I was saying in my report. He said that I had been attempting, this is a quote, attempting to engage in the unauthorized practice of law. And that I was announcing that Mentor Public Schools would be refusing to follow the law. He asked for an official position of the board on whether we were going to enforce executive orders, including the ending indoctrination in K-12 schooling order, And if we plan to follow the law, and he asked, quote, why did a non-attorney board member provide legal analysis on and commentary of the president's executive orders? So I know he's new on the job. But if you had ever attended a school board meeting, you would know that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to. At any rate, so, we had to respond, he said, in 5 days. We had 5 days to respond. And then he closed his letter by asking, quote, are you aware that Lake County receives over $1 billion in state and federal funding? Sincerely, Senator Moreno. We had 5 days. So my board president got together with our attorney, as you do, and said, we have to craft this response to make sure he understands that we are going to follow the law. We always follow the law. We have always, we always will. That's our duty. As a school board member, we take an oath, and we swear to uphold the Constitution of the United States and of the state, right? So we're going to follow the law. And also, that executive order he referenced doesn't have any directives for us to follow right now. So if he had been familiar with that executive order as well, he would have known that it's the agencies that have to act. They have to act by, I think it's the end of April, to come up with some plan about how to rid our schools of radical indoctrination. So we create this response, President Cook does, and she sends it back to him, and that's the last we heard from him. But in the meantime, damage was being done. So as my introducer, Ken. Thank you, sorry, we just met tonight. As Ken mentioned, my face ended up all over the TikTok account, the Lives of TikTok account. If anyone's familiar with that, don't go there, it's not a good place. I think somebody referred to me as the calendar girl of Lives of TikTok that month. It wasn't the first time, unfortunately. And then in come the threats, and in come, people telling me that I should be imprisoned, sending me messages to my personal Facebook account. Our school district, parents, I'm a parent in our school district. I have 2 kids who attend. A lot of us were wondering, what is this going to mean for us? I mean, lots of anxiety, lots of uncertainty during an already very uncertain time for public schools. So the impact was quite huge. And, I already feel pretty unsafe because of the law. If anyone's familiar with Mentor Public Schools, we've been in the media recently in the last several years because things get pretty dramatic over there. So this certainly didn't help things. So this eventually somehow got, I guess you could say, picked up by Breitbart, which is another right-wing news outlet. And Senator Moreno took it upon himself to post that on his social media page. It's still there. It's got about 400 to 500 comments on it that if you are seeking to be entertained, I highly recommend checking it out. But he said, I promise to ensure that the executive orders are enforced across the land. So that's what he's been up to instead of having town halls, if you were curious. I'll also add that, in addition to the uncertainty, the anxiety that this has caused, the actual tangible costs of conflict like this, of course, is that we have to pay our lawyer, right? And that's taxpayer money. So we have to pay our lawyer to help us craft this letter, to create a response within 5 days, and can do that over a weekend, mind you. So, the fact that I'm feeling unsafe, my family's feeling unsafe, there's a lot of parents are unsure, that's a lot from just this little letter that he didn't have to bother to do. So, it makes me wonder why single out a suburban school district, a school board member, one of his constituents? So I guess if you were here tonight, I would ask him, and I wrote this down, why single us out and disrupt an entire school district in your own state you're supposed to represent, demanding a response from us when you yourself won't respond to your own constituents when they demand accountability? I would give them 5 days to respond.
I've got a letter here from an attorney for the Department of Education, Office of Civil Rights, that I've been asked to read because there is a real risk in America today of actually showing up in person and declaring how you feel about the illegality. And I think it's of a piece of what Lauren was describing, this climate of fear that is now a tool of government. They used to answer to us, right? And now we have to answer to them. I think they've got it backwards.
Yeah.
And the last line of that email, I mean, it's almost a mob boss tactic, right? Nice school district you got there. It'd be a shame if something happened to you. And so I'm going to read this letter, but I want you to understand the context, which is, and this note was just handed to me, the federal government on March 6th closed the Cleveland office for the Department of Education Office for Civil Rights. Almost 50 people lost their jobs, impacting a caseload of over 1,100 civil rights cases.
Jeez.
So I understand that, look, it's easy for me to show up. I have a platform that makes hay out of telling the truth about Donald Trump. But if you're one of these civil servants whose livelihood depends on what used to be, a government that let you do your job, and now is after you for doing your job, that's why I have to read this letter. Thank you to everyone who has played a role in organizing this event. This statement concerns the Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights, specifically the Cleveland Field Office. Our office has long been entrusted with the duty to investigate violations of federal law by educational institutions ranging from preschool through college that receive federal funding. Some of the most common laws we are tasked with enforcing protect individuals from discrimination on the basis of sex, race, age, and disability. Regrettably, the systemic erosion of our role as an effective law enforcement body began in earnest this past January. At that time, all attorneys and investigators in all OCR offices were instructed to pause all ongoing investigations and refrain from any communication regarding these cases with either complainants or the schools involved. While such pauses are not uncommon during a presidential transition, the delay in resuming our work extended well beyond the usual time frame, lasting until the end of February. Even then, only cases involving disability discrimination were permitted to proceed, leaving the majority of our caseload unaddressed. It was not until March 6th that we were informed the pause on all cases would be lifted. A subsequent memo from Secretary McMahon conveyed her, quote, looking forward to working with us all. But only days later, on March 11, we received an email notifying us that all offices would need to vacate by 6 p.m. for security reasons. The email further instructed that all staff would telework on March 12th, with in-person work to resume on March 13th. Yet at 7:40 p.m. that same evening, we were informed that the Cleveland office, along with those in Philadelphia, Boston, New York, Chicago, Dallas, and San Francisco, would be abolished. Many of the individuals affected by this decision had dedicated their entire careers to ensuring that children facing unlawful discrimination were afforded the opportunity to continue their education. Some of the children we served were deprived of their right to attend school altogether due to the very discrimination we fought to eliminate. The truth is, the remaining offices simply do not have the capacity to manage the influx of cases now being transferred to them. Prior to the closure of 7 of the 12 offices, each attorney and investigator was responsible for approximately 50 cases, already a heavy burden. The remaining staff will now be tasked with handling more than 140 cases each. Moreover, the logistical challenges of conducting in-person interviews, assessing compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act, and facilitating mediations will become insurmountable, if not financially prohibitive. In addition, it appears that the administration has also reduced the number of human resources and IT support staff, further hampering our ability to perform our essential duties. The hardship faced by those who have lost their jobs, as well as the additional strain placed on those who remain, cannot be overstated. This is not an attempt to save taxpayer dollars. Rather, it is a denial of the vital services that children who have a right to an education free from discrimination so desperately need. What the administration has done here does not serve the public good, but instead robs children of their fundamental rights. Senator Moreno, Congress enacted Title IX, the ADA Title VI, requiring that our office enforce these critical protections in educational institutions. By neglecting to address the abolition of the office tasked with ensuring compliance with these laws in Ohio and Michigan, you are not only failing in your duty to the people of Ohio, but also neglecting your responsibility as a member of a co-equal branch of government. I urge you to address this issue and make certain that the students of Ohio remain safeguarded from unlawful discrimination. Sure. Our next speaker is Representative Juanita Brent of Ohio House District 18. She is in her 4th term and is honored to represent the new district of House District 18. Currently, she serves as ranking member of the Agricultural Committee. Previously, she served as the president of the Ohio Legislative Black Caucus and one of the founders of the Black Maternal Health Caucus. She is the author of House Bill 285, established driver's license reinstatement fee debt reduction program, now a law that helps thousands of Ohioans have a pathway to removing suspended driver's licenses. Wow. Prior to becoming a legislator, Representative Brent sat on the Board of Trustees for the Harvard Community Services Center and the Lee Harvard Community Development Corporation. She brings this experience of building and organizing strong communities with an emphasis on justice and equity to her work in Columbus. Please welcome Representative Juanita Brent.
Perfect. So there's a handout that's going out because I am still old school. Who doesn't like a good piece of paper to go? Somebody's gonna be mad at me because they'll be like, the rep is passing out papers and it's bad for the trees. But today we all have something to learn. This is our state. Yeah. And when we are dealing with this, the problems that we are seeing on the federal level are not just happening on the federal level. They're like, the state of Ohio is like the little kid brother of what's happening on the federal level. It's like a total reflection. So when we're talking about making cuts to healthcare when it comes to Medicaid, we're talking about making sure that now that people are gonna have work requirements, it's gonna affect 770,000 people because they're telling your kids that might be going through a time of transition, they might be in rehab or other type of services, now they have to go to work. Now, don't tell on yourself, but how many of us know somebody that's been in rehab? If you haven't, you probably knew somebody that was in rehab, but probably didn't know they was in rehab, or maybe he was in rehab. But a lot of us know someone that needs those services. 770,000 people. So many nonprofits such as the YWCA, our United Way, are concerned about these cuts that are going to be happening. They're not going to know how they're going to support people who are in this transitioning, because those are the bootstraps that people need. People keep on talking about the bootstraps. These cuts that are being made are literally the bootstraps. So another bootstrap that just happened today. What happened today, everyone? So the Department of Education is getting gutted from the inside out. And so guess who was there clapping, looking all cheesy and stuff? Governor DeWine. Come on. And this is why I say, like, him and Moreno are like two peas in a pod. Two peas in a pod. They clapping. One's there on the federal side to represent us, to dismantle the Department of Education, which we know we make sure that our kids with special education needs receive those services, and make sure that kids who are low income receive services, and make sure that people who need student loans receive those loans. And this man is clapping. He has 8 children. One that's a whole Supreme Court justice. I know there were some loans in that family somewhere along the way. There's a lot of kids. And so if our governor is there to support that, what do you think our state budget is looking like?
Oh, much worse.
So we have a real problem on our hand. I'll just start off at the beginning that 2025 is the year of organizing. And as we are getting together, we are going to have to sacrifice our time, our resources, sometimes even a little bit of our sanity to make them feel uncomfortable. And he's target number 1. Because he is becoming the leader for everybody else. It's the president, him, and then the minions. So when he's clapping to get rid of the Department of Education, you know what Ohio did? Well, we're not gonna do fair school funding anymore in the state of Ohio. And so what's happening is that our budget for our schools are getting cut. Has anybody heard about our cuts that's happening right now in our state budget? Cleveland Municipal School, you might not ever live in Cleveland, but you should be concerned. If this budget passes, 7 schools are gonna get closed down. Shaker Heights, they're gonna lose 2 schools. Orangeville Heights is gonna lose 1 school. East Cleveland is gonna lose 3 schools. They only have 4 schools. So they're gonna merge them into one big building. And so when we see what's happening on a federal level, it's gonna get even worse in our communities. Here within the state of Ohio, can somebody guess how much we are putting towards vouchers? $1 billion. Actually, it's gonna be more than that. It's gonna be pushing, by the time we get done, we're gonna be close to $2.5 billion in vouchers. Most of these kids that are getting the vouchers never even step foot into our public schools. They're taking away the bootstraps. They always tell us, pick yourself up by your bootstraps. The bootstraps is having access to education. And if you don't have those bootstraps, how can you ever be part of the middle class? Target number 1.
You're going to talk to teachers into going into a school that has 8,000 kids in it.
Exactly.
Who's going to want to go in and be in the hallways with 8,000 kids?
I agree.
I mean, you're paying teachers $45,000 a year when they get out of college, and you want them to go into an inner city school full of kids like that. You're not going to have teachers. You're going to need cops.
It's going to be rough. When we had our State of the State address, which was about a week ago, the governor, he was like, thank you to the teachers of the year. And he pointed to them, and they stood up, and everybody started clapping for him. And I was like, this is a whole joke. Because in our budget, just like you said, we are not paying teachers a decent wage.
They got school loans. They just got out of college.
Exactly. And because with the dismantling of the federal Department of Education, what do you think is happening to those student loans?
They're going to double the price. That's what's going to happen to them.
So you had the governor praise him at the State of the State address, but then he's there to clap for the Department of Education to be dismantled. Now people will not have access to student loans. What teachers are you expecting to be here? Anywhere. We have so many people right here in this room that are probably still paying for student loans. Your children have student loans. Your child may be considering going on. And so we think about FAFSA. That's the first form that a lot of times parents fill out when you're thinking about your child going to school. What is that going to look like? Let's fill out the FAFSA. Let's get your tax information so your child can be able to go to school. What are we going to do about sending our kids to school? Your kid said he wants to be an engineer. Now you have to get a private loan. But you've already pulled out that second mortgage on your house. Your credit is not where you would like for it to be, so you can't even co-sign for that loan for your child. But you're making ends meet. You know, you still have your house, you still have your car, but you're not in a position to get the loans out for your child. 2025 is about organizing. So when we have a senator that cuts us at our bootstraps, you should take it as a personal threat to the dismantling of the middle class. And so I think we did not take summer 2024 seriously enough. I don't think we took it seriously enough. I think we were comfortable and everybody was like, people not gonna do all of this. And people did. So now we're gonna have to get organized. I was very entertained I was sitting there just in the back just kind of reading Moreno's Twitter. And I sometimes try to mute him sometimes. Because I'm gonna just tell you honestly, when he first got into office, he sent a message to all of us state reps and say like, hey, y'all Democrats, since you did not support me, don't expect anything from me. So I've gone through 7 years with our previous Senator, Sherrod Brown, who handwritten notes. Anybody got a personal note you ever got from the senator?
Yeah.
Send handwritten notes when he would talk to you. Make sure his constituent service people followed up with you. To a person on day one, say, hey, you're a Democrat, don't ask me for nothing.
Whoa.
And I was like, is this serious? This is an attack on the middle class
Yes.
of having access. So I'm just saying some things just for entertainment purposes, but this really came off his Twitter. So it's entertainment for us, but it's reality at the same time too. So we look at what people do, and you can look at my social media, the good ones. I'm gonna just say our Senator, Nikki Antonio, who's in the back, who's gonna talk. She's one of the good ones. When people are in the community, they show up. If you look at his Twitter feed, he is not showing up in our community at all. But I'm gonna talk to you about what he put on his Twitter. February 12th, he talked about English is our official language. Now, it's a lot of smart people in this room. Some people smarter than me, probably a lot of people smarter than me. Do we have official language in the United States? Oh, okay, that was February 12th. I'm just making sure. I just had to check. And February 21st, he said, I am building up he said Trump is building up the most diverse cabinet. Now, I was always told not to call people liars. Weren't you told that? You were told not to call people liars, especially people with big titles, so I'm not gonna call him a liar. But if you wanna call him one, you can. Exactly. And so also, he puts out his first bill to ban foreign flags on the Capitol. Now, I don't know everything, and just you can have your own opinion about foreign flags. Thank you. Support the Ukraine. Thank you. I didn't pay her to do that either. She just did.
None of us are getting paid tonight.
No. But he has a flag for Israel on his door at his office. This office is at the Capitol. But he has a bill to get rid of that. And so it's like a monkey see, monkey do type of thing. So then I have a colleague at the State House who tells us, well, I want a bill to get rid of foreign flags here at the State House too. Why? What flags are we flying up? But this is the state of events that we are going through. And so 2025 is about organizing and telling people when stuff is not true and calling people on their stuff. Everybody. I brought this up for everyone to look at just real quick because the state of Ohio is looking like a small version of Trumpism. We don't have to go far, we don't have to do much. We're experiencing it right now. And I'm not gonna go through all of this, but I'm just gonna highlight a couple quick things, and I'm gonna bring it over to my good sister, Senator Nikki Antonio. One of the things I just mentioned was about the school funding. That's a problem. The dismantling it on the federal level and then the defunding it on the state level. We're gonna have areas within the state of Ohio that will not have schools. I mean, we're going a whole step back. And people, when I tell people that, they cannot believe me because they're like, how are we living in this wonderful country, in theory, but possibility of losing our schools? But at the same time, within our budget, we're about to be paying for 2 football teams. But we can't pay for school funding. We want to dismantle school funding. But we're about to put $1 billion towards football teams. And $2.5 billion towards school vouchers. But we can't fund public schools. And this is what you guys have to think about as we talk about the dismantling of the Federal Department of Education. Private and charter schools do not have to accept everybody's child. So if our state is defunding public schools and you do not have a public school for your child to go to, where do you go? And I mean, somebody said homeschool, but that's me, you have to be at home. Who's gonna make the money? So all of this stuff is all together. So when he doesn't want to answer our calls, when he wants to send us a generic response, because the same response that you guys are getting is the same response he's giving me. It's the same response. 2025 is about organizing.
Yeah.
Vote him out.
We have a time within the state of Ohio where everybody's vehicle registration is about to go up by $20. You're gonna be like, why is my vehicle registration going up by $20? Because within the state of Ohio, we are not using our general revenue funds to pay for the highway patrol. So instead of the highway patrol having money from a guaranteed source, they're just gonna increase your vehicle registration. And somebody's like, well, I support the police, and I do too. But I say this, Ohio has a full rainy day fund. Our rainy day fund is full. We're cutting money for schools. We're giving money to 2 football teams. We're giving money to vouchers. And then you come to the highway patrol and say, well, we pay for all this, but you gotta get your money from the car registration. That's what we're doing here in Ohio. It's on the backs of the middle class. So everything that this one is doing and the ones here in Ohio is doing is to dismantle the middle class. And that's how you have to start thinking about it. That you dismantle education, you increase the vehicle registration, and someone's like, well, $20 and $10 is not that much, I can do that. That stuff starts adding up. For some of y'all kids, that's coffee for a week. I know they're asking y'all for $5 to go to Starbucks. So read this good information that's going on. If you're concerned about your electric bill, First Energy is having, the PUCO is having hearings about First Energy. You know, we had that whole $1 billion, scam. It's not even a bailout, it was a scam. They're trying to go up on our electric bills. If you would like to testify for that, please show up. They're assuming that you're not going to show up for these hearings. Here, you can have this. Would you like one too? I got some extra here.
I got it in the mail. We got more.
But 2025 is a year of organizing, and I want you guys to just do a favor for me real quick. I sent out a great State House update. I could be a little biased. So it was 2 pages. There's 2 pages together. Give her the other page.
I got this.
No. Those 2 pages go together.
There's 2 pages.
Yes, 2 pages.
Oh my God.
She was being really nice. So I do send out a State House update, and I'll sit down, that gives you action calls, inside information, whatever else is going on. When we were having the vote for Senate Bill 1, I sent out an email out to people Thursday night that the vote was going to be on Wednesday. Because I'm there. I'm having dinner with Chairman Young. He likes to rap. He thinks I like to listen. And so I listen to his rap, and he tells me like, hey, we're having a committee hearing on Wednesday. I was like, Fitz, send out a memo, let all the activists know that there's gonna be a vote for Senate Bill 1. So if you would like to sign up for my State House update, it comes out every Monday with action calls and bills to watch. You can text me real quick. I'm here for a good time, not a long time. It is 216. Oh, I'm sorry. Come on, start walking up here, Senator. You up next. It's 216-413-8932. So send your email address and your first and last name, and then we can sign you up for the State House update. Now, I know I wasn't supposed to introduce her, but I'm gonna bring her up. And I want to say this publicly because we don't know how long we're gonna be together. Coming to the State House is a scary place. It's not that many women that are here, and that women that you can talk to and you can lean on. The senator and I tell you, we go to a lot of events together. I represent the East Side, she represents the West Side, and I really do feel like she's been my sister this time of being at the State House. And so term limits are terrible, and both of us are termed out. But every day from the time I've been here at the State House, she's been right there next to me. So I want to publicly thank you for being a great leader, as a minority leader, but also just a leader in our community. So without further ado, our wonderful state senator should have been our U.S. senator. The minority leader, the Democratic leader, and the state senate, Nikki Antonio.
The amazing Juanita Brent. You don't mind if I stand in front of you, do you? Yeah. Go right.
Have a seat.
Yeah, yeah. Nah, I don't want to sit on this lap. How are you?
All right.
Thank you for being honest. I feel your pain, I share it. I just drove back from Columbus today, a little while ago. And, you know, it's interesting, we just, as Representative Brent said, we just did the state of the state. You know, and the state of the state is uncertain. The state of our country is uncertain. And uncertainty is the worst. It really is the worst. Because when something terrible happens, and it's happened, then we pull ourselves together and figure out how to deal with it. Something wonderful happens, hopefully we all know how to celebrate when something great happens, but this place in between, I think, is the most difficult for most of us, for sure, because we just don't know. This is all intentional. This is intentional. This is part of the plan, part of Project 2025, part of the playbook. And I echo what Representative Brent said in terms of everything that's happening on the federal level is affecting us at the state level. We've been at it a little bit longer here in Ohio because we have had majority extremist Republican rule for quite a while now. And there's been this slow chipping away and a couple steps forward. Every once in a while, because of all of you in this room, there's been pushback and there's been delay. As in Senate Bill 83 that did not pass. Yes, you can clap for that. You all did that. You stopped it. And then, unfortunately, Senate Bill 1, which just came out of the House, has to come back to the Senate next week for concurrence. Sadly, there will be concurrence on the Republicans' part. They're very clear about that. The Democrats will push back and will not accept it. But you slowed the tide, and I have to say that slowing the tide is a win. We just have to acknowledge that, and we have to take a moment to breathe it in as we continue to fight and push forward. I've been in the legislature since 2011. I walked in the door when the Senate Bill 5 fight for the bargaining rights of public employees. Thank you. And again, it was because of so many people that came, that pushed back. We had a referendum. People who were not part of labor unions joined in the fight. They voted, overwhelming majority across the state voted because they understood. First they come for the trade unionists, and then they come for the next group, and the next group. And finally, as Pastor Niemöller said during World War II, and then they came for me and there was no one left to speak up for me. We absolutely, I believe, in the state of Ohio and in the communities that are paying attention, understand that and are pushing back. The fact that you're all here tonight tells me, and don't let anyone ever tell you that woke is a bad thing, by the way. I mean, no, what's the opposite? Being asleep? I don't know. You know, it's like, I don't want to be asleep, I want to be awake, I want to be paying attention. Just like diversity, equity, and inclusion and accessibility are all they're building blocks of the foundation of our democracy. We should be proud of it. One little tidbit from the State House, Senator, see, I already called you Senator, I gave you a promotion. Representative Brent did a great job talking about some of the key issues that are coming up with our budget and continue to, and the ironies and the discrepancies about what's a priority to fund by the majority. One of the things that came up in the past 2 weeks in the House was that there are a few of our wonderful colleagues who think they should start a Doge caucus.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I sat down with my staff, and in less than 5 minutes, I think it took us about 2 minutes, we came up with the following list of accountability, and this was just systems in place and process in place, and this was a quick read. The Controlling Board, JLEC, JMOC, JCAR, Occupation Licensing and Review, Sunset Review, Senate House Committees, Government Oversight and Reform, Local Government, General Government, Finance, Lean Ohio, Innovate Ohio, and the budget, the biennium budget, and the capital budget, and the transportation budget. There's a whole lot of accountability and looking at what we do right now that is totally not necessary, but it's this copycat behavior that we see going on. Everything that's happening at the federal level in the executive office, and I use the term loosely, is also something that they'd like to copycat. Doesn't mean we need it, doesn't mean it's a threat, doesn't mean there's anything wrong at the state level, quite the contrary. But this is the copycat. Because, and I'm sure many of you know this, but I just want to make sure, as you're all here, and as we're talking about this, that we know how high the stakes are. Because every single action that you're seeing is coming from the authoritarian playbook. Politicizing independent institutions, spreading disinformation, aggrandizing executive power, quashing dissent, scapegoating vulnerable communities, corrupting elections, and stoking violence. This is our life right now, sadly. And to the folks who spoke earlier, I was a teacher of kids with special needs. I was a special education teacher before that was my first job. Thank you. It was the job that motivated me to run for office. Do y'all hear me? Because somebody in this room called me, talked to me. It was the thing that motivated me to run for office. Because I asked about all the policies. Why are we doing what we're doing? And it always came back to some kind of a policy that the legislature or Congress was deciding. Public Law 94-142 was burned into my brain. That was the law that opened the doors for kids with special needs to walk into the school. A lot of them were kept at home. Not only walk into the school, but go to the least restricted environment to get their education, intersperse and mingle with other kids with different abilities, so that everybody learned from everybody. Because we all benefit from that, right? So the final thing I want to say, because I know it's late, and I know we have a lot to do, but I also don't usually use my phone to do this kind of stuff, but it's been one of those weeks. And so, let me was that? There we go. I keep saying that George Orwell, who wrote 1984, by the way, he wrote that in the 40s. You all know that, right? Yeah. I keep telling young people to read it, and the young people who have read it and they come back to me say, how did he know? How did he do that? Because he literally was describing our lives right now and our situation. And I said, well, sometimes it's important for us to see that, to hear that, to reflect. And I think to acknowledge in this time period the reality of our situation, because I think many of us, I know it happens for me, I have been questioning my sanity, doing a reality check for myself. Am I really going too far with this?
No.
And I came to that answer as well. So I want to leave you with not the authoritarian playbook, but actually what we do to protect and to fight our democracy. First of all, learn what in the world is going on. You absolutely are doing that. Build community. Representative Brent was right. This is an opportunity to organize. Organizing, collectively, putting ourselves in a room with other folks who are not just feeling what we're feeling and seeing what we're seeing, but also want to strategize about what we can do on the small, local level, as well as the big stuff. Because every moment, every movement you make towards some kind of change, some kind of resistance, makes a difference. It absolutely makes a difference. Yes? Engage in political action. And there's a lot of other things, but in the interest of time, one of the things that I think is really, really important for all of us to keep in mind, when you go out, when you stand in solidarity with everyone and everything that's going on, the most important thing that we can all do to be effective is engage in peaceful protest. For so many reasons, the one kind of protest throughout all of the years, all of the decades that protest has been effective, it is effective when it's nonviolent. And it's really, really important. There are people who do trainings in nonviolent protest. I think we should all get ourselves trained. Yeah. We should be prepared. We should bring friends with us to trainings like that. Folks can conduct those trainings who know how to organize big groups like this. Over the years, I've participated in quite a few of those kinds of trainings. And I'm just absolutely, it is the thing, because the authoritarians, the way they take us down is they want an excuse to declare martial law. Yeah. We cannot give them, now they can do it on their own, but we will not give them that opportunity. And through building these kinds of networks and skill building, we can, I believe, push back, persevere, repeat often, but ultimately, we take back our democracy. Thank you so much.